So today we're going to be looking at mounting orchids. You saw me in the opening there mounting some Neophonetia onto a tree along with a couple ferns. When you're mounting orchids, you have to ask the question, why are you mounting them? Some of them just grow better that way. Sometimes they can't be grown any other way. And anyway, we'll be looking at that. So I've got a number of mounted orchids here that we're going to be looking at today, including this guy here, which is a huge Dendrobium maniliforme. You can see that this thing actually, here's the old mount here, to the point where it's not even a serviceable mount anymore. What's basically holding the plant up at this point is just its root ball. So at this point in time, what the heck do you do with a plant like this? You could try to mount it onto a tree. See, like I could put this part, yeah, I'd have to sacrifice a few of those new growths coming, but you could mount it onto a tree. But this is one of the problems with mounting, is that if you mount an orchid, then you're kind of stuck with keeping it as a mount or having at some point to kind of butcher it to create a new situation where you're either forcing it into a pot and or you're trying to mount it onto something else. Other species such as this bulbophyllum are just natural rangers. You can see he's got some flowers there still just finishing. They range around, right? So they kind of can't really grow in a pot well over time. You really have to either mount them or, I don't know, put them in kind of a basket culture, which I've done with some of my free-ranging orchids like this. But I think this really is a plant that really needs to have a mount of some kind. So I'm probably going to mount this onto the ume tree over here. Another way that you can grow Neophonetia is in this kind of a mounting form here. I mean, I just decided to make this kind of like little swing, and this is a Tamakongo, which is a plant that really likes to form these big clumps, and it likes to have these big crazy roots, so it's a great way to grow it. You don't always have to grow these in pots. They do really great mounted, so this is a great example of how to do it, and it's pretty maintenance free. Once you put it on there, it just grows all by itself, so it's a nice option for this species. Here's another Dendrobium maniliforme growing on a mount. This is on a tree fern mount, and probably about, oh my gosh, let's see, 6 or 7 years ago I had this plant mounted very much like this specimen here, and you can see that over time this starts to degrade, and in fact this probably will only last a while. Let's see, it's got a little bend to it. It's probably good for another 2 or 3 years. But this eventually is going to have to be mounted in another way. So what I did with this guy here is something very similar, right? I put him onto this larger piece, and you can see here that there is the old mount there, right? So again, you can, if you run into a problem with an already mounted plant, you don't want to tear it up, you can just simply mount it onto another mount, and it'll grow eventually onto that. And I guess logically you could just keep doing that on and on and on and on, so you've got a gigantic plant. I didn't want to break this guy up. Another problem with growing with mounts is that the plant can overgrow the mount, or the mount can become too small, like you saw with that Dendrobium before. This is a young specimen of Euchyle citrina, and you can see that it's doing rather well here. It's little seedling bulbs, but it's reaching the point where it's going to actually start outgrowing this mount, so I have to make a decision of what I want to do if I want this plant to keep thriving. So I either can mount it onto a bigger mount like I did before with the Dendrobium, or I can add more moss to it this year and maybe eke out another 2 or 3 seasons with this particular mount. So in any event, something I need to do with this. Also here I have a little mini cat that I've been growing for probably 15 years on this mount, and the mount itself is quite strong, But you can see the plant has kind of outgrown it. It's kind of in a weird shape, and I don't think the plant is thriving the way it could. So in this case, rather than remounting it, I think I'm going to actually pull it off here hard and physical, and then just have it regrow new roots. This new growth point is this new eye that's coming is it's doing well, but it hasn't grown any roots yet, so I think I need to get this thing potted up at some point. So I'm going to actually take this one off the mount, which again is a problem with mounting orchids. I've decided to keep the euchyle on its tree fern mount and just add some more moss to help retain moisture and nutrients. First, I need to tie some fish line to the mount. I prefer fish line because it's both durable and nearly invisible. Next, sphagnum moss is formed and pressed to the mount. Then, with care, I wrap the fish line around the mount, thus securing the moss in place. Don't forget to make a knot to keep the line from unraveling. This process is repeated until I'm satisfied with the amount of moss and also that it is secured tightly. Finally, the excess line is cut off. The new moss should hold it over for at least a couple more seasons. The plant is now ready to put back into the garden. Next up is the bulbophyllum. The process is much the same, but this time I use garden twist tie wire, mostly because it is convenient to use compared to the fish line. After the plant is secured to the tree, sphagnum is added to encourage root growth. The wire is wound around the plant and branch until the plant and moss are well secured. The loose ends of the wire are twisted together and then the excess is cut off. These are a couple of ways to mount orchids. The mounting substrate can be a living plant, various organic mounts such as tree fern fiber or cork bark, or even inorganic substrates such as concrete or rock. With mounts, humidity will naturally have to remain high most of the time, and waterings will need to be frequent as well. The plants will also require fertilizing if they are expected to thrive. I hope you found this video informative. I leave you now with some scenes from my garden this past week. See you next time.